Good evening, everyone. On behalf of ISA Delhi, I welcome you all to this clinical meet organized by Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Hospital and Sanjay Gandhi Memorial Hospital. Okay. We start with flag hoisting of ISA.
May I request all of you to please stand for the ISA flag hoisting.
Can we have the welcome slides? Okay, let me introduce you the office bearers of ISA. First of all, Dr. Rajiv Gupta, Governing Council member, North, ISA National. Dr. Nikki Sabharwal, President, ISA Delhi. Dr. G. Usha, Vice President, ISA Delhi. Dr. Umesh K. Deshmukh, Secretary, ISA Delhi. Dr. Anu Vijayant Goyal, Treasurer, ISA Delhi, and Dr. Parul Malik, Editor, ISA Delhi. Dr. Arvind Arya, Governing Council, East Zone, ISA Delhi. Dr. Arun Mehra, Governing Council, West Zone, ISA Delhi. Dr. Amit Kohli, Governing Council, Central Zone, ISA Delhi. Dr. Ashish Dang, Governing Council, North Zone, ISA Delhi. And Dr. Ranju Gandhi, Governing Council, South Zone, ISA Delhi. May I request Honorary Secretary to say a few words.
Is Dr. Umesh with us? I don't see him.
He was there just.
Was?
He,
Dr. Umesh, are you with us?
no, he's not there. I think he's not with us, and he's enjoying the meeting. And can we start?
Yeah, Dr. Umesh maybe caught up Dr. Naveen with some case, so he may not have been able to join. So I apologize on his behalf. With your permission, I'll just
Yes.
Give my address for today's evening.
Sure, ma'am, please.
So very, very good evening to one and all. I'm very happy to welcome you all to our last clinical meeting of this year. It is being hosted by Babasaheb Ambedkar Hospital and the Sanjay Gandhi Memorial Hospital. So I thank both the heads of departments and your teams, Dr. Naveen Kumar and Dr. Nimfia Kaul, HODs of both the hospitals, and your teams for organizing today's meeting. I know it's a tough time for everybody, and we're all, we were hoping that COVID would have gone by now, but it's, resurging and re-emerging, and so our challenges are continuing. But I'm very happy to say that most of our hospitals have stuck to the timing and they have been able to conduct the clinical meetings. So today also I see you've got some 3 very interesting presentations lined up, followed by a quiz. So we are eagerly looking forward to those. And I wish to announce today that, I had mentioned in the newsletter also and in the previous clinical meeting that from this year, the ISA National has extended the office bearers' tenure till 16th of October. So all the state branch presidents and secretaries and the other office bearers, they will be continuing till 16th October, and that is when we will be handing over to the next team. So our annual conference, we have scheduled, planned for 28th and 29th of August, which is a Saturday and a Sunday. And I request all of you to block your dates. The details will follow as soon as our venue is finalized and the program gets finalized. But kindly block your dates for 28th and 29th of August. On the 16th of October, we will have the World Anesthesia Day, and during that ceremony, we will be handing over to the next office bearers. I also would request all my esteemed members, especially the seniors, to give suggestions for the annual conference, what we would like to have and hold. And also, in the 5 years, like I told you, we had made a calendar for the clinical meeting last year. And we've been having at least 2 or 3 programs every month to give opportunity to more hospitals. So we took advantage of the e-platform, and we have been having more than one clinical meeting. Like, the physical meetings used to be once a month, so only 11 institutions could participate. But this year it has been our endeavor, and we have succeeded that we could have more clinical meetings. So now we have an extra 5 months, and if we wish to have any other activities under the ISA Delhi banner, the suggestions will be welcome. We also plan to release 2 books in the annual conference. One will be the directory of the ISA Delhi members. So I solicit your cooperation in, our GC members and the EC members will be reaching out to all of you to provide your details for the directory. Secondly, on the 16th of October last year, we had brought out a news bulletin which had the history of the stalwarts of Delhi anesthesia. And we want to continue with that and bring out a book on the history of anesthesia of Delhi. And we would like to release it in the annual conference. So I wish that all the senior members give the names of their seniors, the eminent anesthesiologists, both in the private and the government sectors, so that we could include their, short biographies in this book. I also would request all the heads of departments to kindly ensure that all your anesthesiologists of the department are life members or associated members of ISA. And as soon as the conference details are out, we would be requesting for the registration for that. So it's very, very nice to see Dr. Rakesh Kumar, Dr. Anil Mishra, Rajinder, Nandita, all my friends, seniors, juniors, colleagues, and it's lovely to see you all having organized this program. I'm waiting to hear you. And thank you again. Thank you very much. Long live ISA Delhi, long live ISA National. Jai Hind. Thank you.
Yes, before we go ahead with our clinical presentations, we have a short promotional video. Can we have that?
Hello, doctors. I'm Milap Singh from Koe Pharmaceuticals. I'm proud to present AG Kafil, makes cough control easy. AG Kafil is an innovative digital manometer from Hospitec Respiration of Israel, and AG Kafil is FDA approved, CE certified, and globally available. Now, we all know the current methods for measuring the cuff pressure, such as finger estimation or using a stethoscope to assess the minimum air leak, or even the use of analog manometer, tend to be inaccurate. And in fact, this was demonstrated by Sen Gupta et al. That even trained anesthesiologists overinflate the ET tube cuff by 2 to 3 times the needed pressure. Now, this could lead to severe complications such as sore throat, hoarseness, even tracheal necrosis or tracheoropharyngeal fistula. On the other hand, underinflation may lead to aspiration of subglottic secretions or aspiration of gastric contents, which may even lead to ventilator-associated pneumonia. AG Kafil makes cough control easy. Now, we are used to handling a 10 cc syringe for inflating and deflating the endotracheal cuff. AG Kafil is a 10 cc syringe with a difference. There is a battery embedded in the plunger. An LCD display is attached to the plunger. There is an electrical circuit inside the barrel of plunger and a pressure sensor at the tip of plunger. Thus, when the AG Kafil is connected to the pilot tube, you get an accurate reading on the LCD display. And AG Kafil is very easy to use as well. All you have to do when inflating, pull back the plunger, switch on the device by pressing this yellow button, connect to pilot tube and start inflating. And as you start inflating, you can see the pressure, the real-time pressure of the endotracheal cuff, and you can stop inflating at the desired level. Now, based on discussions with various anesthesiologists, for adults, the desired pressure is between 20 and 30 centimeters of water. And for children, the desired pressure level is 15 to 20 centimeters of water. Now, this device or AG Kafil is easy to calibrate also. You don't have to send it out for any calibrations. When you switch on by pressing this yellow button, the first display that you see would be the number of readings which are remaining. The second display would be 00, indicating the device is ready for use. If you get any other number other than 00, means the device requires calibration. All you have to do is wait for the device to switch off automatically after 60 seconds. Hold the yellow button down for more than 5 seconds after that. The LCD display will blink and display 00, indicating that calibration has been successfully completed. Thus, AG Kafil makes cough control easy is a compact pocket-sized syringe-like design, an accurate solution for measuring both pressure and volume, designed for enhanced patient safety, thus minimizing the human error while measuring or inflating tracheal cuffs. It's a reusable multi-patient device and is designed to allow up to 100 measurements or 100 readings. Syringe or the AG Kafil can be cleaned and disinfected between each patient use by following the cleaning instructions mentioned in the IFU. Now, there are various questions asking why there is a need for AG Kafil when for so many years patients have been managed without any device or without any issues. Now, when we look at the various articles and various trials which have been published, when we look at Journal of Medical Association of Thailand published in November 2007 by Sri Dharma et al., indicated that inflation of endotracheal should be guided by manometer to achieve a pressure of 30 centimeters every 8 hours. Now, this trial was conducted on patients in ICU who required constant monitoring and needed to be monitored every 8 hours. Even Eric Steffel from Texas has used this device and said that use of manometer device such as a syringe manometer, that is AG Cuffle, to measure the actual cuff pressure is key to success. S. Balakrishna, Indian Journal of Clinical Anesthesia, 2016. The objective was that clinicians still depend on subjective methods like pilot balloon palpation or appreciation of audible or palpable leak disappearance for assessing the adequacy of cuff pressure. However, he concluded that the objective measurement of cuff pressure would be made mandatory, and status of cuff pressure manometer would change from luxury to necessity. Just as the pulse oximeter, which was initially considered as a luxury, today it is a mandatory. Pediatric Anesthesia 2014, A.S. Ramesh et al., they have concluded that this device is simple, reliable, portable, and affordable method to monitor the cuff pressure. Now, in this trial, they have used AG Cuffle to study the efficacy and accuracy. The latest of the trials published in BMC Anesthesiology 2020 by Fritz et al. Of Mayo Hospital, USA, they have concluded that the use of manometry reduced the incidence of moderate to severe post-operative sore throat in pre versus post-intervention groups. And they have concluded that intraoperative management of intracuff pressures based on manometry is feasible to implement in clinical practice and can reduce the post-operative airway complications. All this prove that AG Cuffle should be used to measure and regulate the intracuff pressures of endotracheal tubes, tracheotomy tubes, or even LMAs. Thus, COE is proud to introduce the revolutionary device that world is embracing for safer cuff pressure management. AG Cuffle, cuff pressure control made easy. You can visit our website www.cuffle.in to book a demo or even purchase the device directly online. Or you can even call us on our toll-free number 1-800-121-3536. We are open to any questions and would be glad to address them. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we are moving ahead clinical presentations. Let me introduce you to our speakers. Our first speaker is Dr. Rakesh Kumar, who will be talking about learning while teaching, our experience. This session will be moderated by Dr. Shakti Rath Sharma. We can take up the questions just after the presentation, each presentation. Over to Dr. Shakti.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to invite Dr. Rakesh Kumar. He's ex-director professor, Maulana Medical College, and everyone knows him. Introducing him is like showing candle to the sun. Let's hear Dr. Rakesh Kumar. Dr. Rakesh. Sir.
Can't see myself. Where am I?
You are here, sir. Yeah.
Oh,
Hi,
you can speak. I can't see myself here. अन्य है क्या नाम है?
Amya.
Amya. Amya, can you please change the setting in the BSA hospital?
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Sir, during presentation, the means presenter cannot see themselves, so but we can see you.
Hanji?
सर आपको हम देख पा रहे हैं सर, प्रेजेंटर अपने आपको नहीं देख पाएंगे.
अच्छा, इसके अंदर हमारी स्क्रीन पे भी नहीं आएगा?
नहीं, प्रेजेंटर अपने आप
ठीक है,
आप
ठीक है, that's fine, that's fine.
सर आपके
slides are
स्क्रीन
visible?
में
हाँ, slides are
छोटा सा
visible, I know. Thank
जी
you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Shakti and Dr. Naveen. वो मना कर रहा है. हाँ, I know. He's saying I will not be seen here. So, very good afternoon, and it's a great privilege to be part of this presentation. And I bring you greetings from my previous institution where I spent a good 42 years of anesthesia practice. That is Maulana Azad Medical College and Lok Nayak Hospital, Delhi University. And also from two big groups that I am a part of, American Heart Association and Airway Management Foundation. And finally, the two living in relationships that I have been in the last few months with SGT University for 5.5 months. For another 2 months, I have been here at Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Hospital and Medical College, and enjoying the company of some of my best friends out here. And while I was beginning to talk about this topic, that is, learning while teaching, it is basically based on my experience at MAMC and Lok Nayak Hospital. And as I was sitting in this room, I just saw a placard put up there right in front of me, which says that a teacher, and I quote from Rabindranath Tagore, a teacher can never truly teach unless he is still learning himself. And it goes on. So, it kind of sums up what I want to say. And when I talk about our journey or our experience, I'll go through this outline. Who are we? What has been our journey and the lessons learned en route? Well, we are a group of fun-loving human beings. We enjoy our work and find it exciting to make others understand what we found tricky to learn. We have been reasonably average students of anesthesiology, and as you grow in a subject, you realize that there is so much to learn. So a few things that we found tricky, we feel that it can be made simpler for others. So that was the idea, and we all enjoy it. The groups which you see on the right of your screen, it includes a lot of those people, number of them. Of course, the three oldies which you see at the bottom, we began together, so that is why they are a little separate from the group. But I think the biggest thing that we grew up into was that we have been best of friends, but severest of critics as far as our work is concerned. And it can be put the other way around, that we are severest of critics, yet we have remained best of friends. And it doesn't apply only to these three chaps, but to a number of people on the screen on the right side. And our journey began in end of 2003, 2004, beginning when we, entered this area called airway management and trying to teach people skills of airway management. It was looked down upon at that point of time, and gradually the time has now come that there are hundreds of airway conferences every day, every year in this very country. And so we feel very proud that we began with that. And around the same time, we went into life support skill training as well. And then a lot of institutions came together to form what we now know as Airway Management Foundation. And we started at MAMC, as I told you, till 2013, and then 2013 made it into an Airway Management Foundation. And we have been lucky to have people from all around the country and the world come and join us, and and interaction and exchanging ideas, and that has been a great fun. And we have been quite busy all these years, and that is a wonderful thing to happen when you are nearing your retirement, or even after retirement. If somebody wants you to do something, it's very nice. And we have had a lot of resource material in the form of the equipment, the mannequins, the simulators, the patients, whole range of patients that we have been exposed to. But our main strength, as I said, has been the team of instructors that we have, the pool that we have built over a period of time. Now we have more than 170 instructors in Airway Management Foundation, and we have trained more than 5,000 people. And this was the last conference that we had in Delhi last year before the pandemic hit. And you can see these enthusiastic instructors. They are part of that journey I'm talking about. And then, of course, the life support thing started in 2005 when, against our wishes, because we thought we knew everything about life support, this chap on the screen, Dr. Shaktidat Sharma, forced us to go through a structured training. And that was, I think, a life-changing moment for all of us, because we immediately fell in love with this structured way of teaching and got obsessed, and like-minded friends joined us along the way. And that journey has gone a long way. Of course, no journey is possible unless you have well-wishers along the way. And Dr. Arun Agarwal and Dr. Dua at that point of time were real forces to help support us. And of course, there were a number of people all around the country. Just a few names to tell you. There have been hundreds of them. And the support material has been the same. And as I said, the main strength is the number of instructors that we have had. And over the year, we built a strength of 572 instructors and have trained more than 60,000 people in the process. So now this was the journey. But what I wanted to stress upon is, as we grew into this, we started realizing that we were learning more than we were teaching. And that is what I want to share with you. Maybe it matters to some of us as we go along. And these are just some of the points that I could bring about that we learned as we were trying to teach. So I'll elaborate on them, each one of them. The skills of planning. People would come to us and we'll tell them that do this case like this, do that case like this. But gradually we realized that we could go through a structured approach, which is given out by algorithms. Algorithms, again, look very beautiful on the paper. When you start looking at them, actually they look menacing, When you look all the arrows, you are standing in a bloody Kurukshetra with arrows coming from all over the place. So we started realizing that they have to be broken down into smaller parts, so that the person who's going to use it for the first time becomes friendly with them, and then you have to go back and forth and to create your final plans. So the algorithm which I just show you, can be broken down into this, like this, and whether we are going to the right, and then what are the options on the right, going to the left, and what are the options on the right, on the left, and then further down, further options, and so on. Suddenly it becomes doable. Suddenly it becomes that it is applicable. I can also do it. And the end result was that our postgraduates, first year postgraduates, by second or third month, started actually planning their course of action. Whether they faltered, they did well, they didn't do well. We always, we could tell them that we also began like that, much worse than that actually. So, and then of course, have a checklist to align your planning. And that is what we have published in 2020, at the end of 2020. This is just one of the methods of planning your airway assessment. And so they should finally be able to check the checklist, put the check click the right boxes or not. The second thing which we learned was making videos. Videos is a great method of interacting. And even better, creating good videos is a wonderful learning experience. Just look at these videos that we, just let me run these for you. All these are talking about how to introduce an eye gel. There are these videos are running. But one is that you create these videos. Second, you look at these videos, then suddenly you realize that, oh, no, I'm holding the eye gel at the wrong. I was pushing it in the wrong direction. So I have to go back, create another video. And, this is what teaches you. You are your own critic, and you start realizing what can be changed. And when you are doing it in the form of steps, like this one. Now, just look at this video where we are trying to tell how to use a bougie in a 3A Corbach and Lehane grading. So first of all, I have to be bloody well able to tell what is 3A. So I should be able to show it on the screen. For that, the first time I held this laryngoscope, the person standing next to me, Dr. Neera, she told me, "Sir, ye to 2A ke 2B kar diya aapne." So, you start learning much more than what you're doing. And then, of course, actually putting the bougie and showing it to yourself, it is such a fun experience that, you are learning it. Just look at the lower video where we are doing what is called the OEM. Until I made this video, I did not know that it is the person who is doing laryngoscopy who has to put his hand and then take the hand of the assistant and do the same thing. While the assistant keeps the hand relaxed, that the final position can be made. So that is what we learned as we started making videos. And then, of course, we created this video, I remember, with Dr. Sonia Vadhavan, and it looked a wonderful video, but we did not have a sound. So she had to speak the same thing over and over again. So we started, creating smaller videos. This became a very long video, but as we did it, but at the same time, we learned every part of this instrument and how to use it, because we had to tell somebody how to use it, right? And then we fell into the second trap, which is making movies. And you remember, this man with white beard, this Anil Mishra, he is a great actor. So he was a wonderful foil for all of us. And so we said, fine, okay, let us make him into the patient, ideal patient to have. Just look at the way he is. So we did not know that he is going to act that well. We were not ready to hold him. So just look at this. Let me stop it here. So this was the previous guidelines. According to the previous guidelines, he was to assess the breathing as well as responsiveness at the same time. Now the guidelines changed in 2015. So what do? So we change and we go on to the same scenario, but we have to change it. So what I'm trying to say is that once you have created a video with actual friends and actual actors, then it sticks in your mind for good, So it's a great experience. And to create this video, remember Dr. Shakti, Anil, they are both there. It took us almost 8 days to create the script, first of all, and then to shoot it, to get the ambulance at the right time, at the right place, and so on. It's a great learning. We have learned much more than we did. This was another thing which luckily happened to us, while we were shooting for something else. Sometimes you get lucky, and I'll begin from somewhere in the center. Right. So something happened, and we were in the chapter. What I'm trying to say is that you are creating video for something else, and sometimes which is not shared with the people. This video has been used by Xavier. It has been used by for a lot of teaching purposes. But for Hamlick's Maruva, it seems very easy. You have never done it yourself. You have done it yourself. No chance. Then, in the same process, we learned that mannequins and simulators are our great teachers. They do not scold us. They are not sarcastic. They are not going to mark you absent or present, and you can learn from them. So we loved them. But at the same time, we realized that it is not the top class mannequin which is important. It is the person who is using it is more important. And we realized, and we actually used it in our institution, that we forced our authorities not to spend on too much on simulators, but to spend on creating a pool of hi-fi instructors first. Once the instructors are created, only then the mannequins will actually work the way they should. And creating these simulation scenarios is a great learning process. Again, every time you are prepared, and therefore the programmed scenarios are absolute rubbish. They fall flat because they never understand what the actual people who are going to run that scenario are going to do. And they take you in an absolutely new direction. So that is why the person using them is so important. And by doing these simulation scenarios, we realized how to work with equals, how to work with peers. How peers means the person who is a first year senior resident, he is my junior colleague. And we have to work the same way as I'm working with the senior most person. And all these features of working together, we learned again and again and started using in day-to-day process. And we have been really blessed to have learned it quite some time back. And we also realized that if you have to test somebody, if you have to transfer skills, you must have a very clear-cut plan. So you have a standardized learning process, a standardized assessment process. And how do you standardize the steps? You will have to write them. And once you write them and actually start doing them, you said, oh, kya likh diya maine yaar? Ye to ho hi nahi raha. So you have to rewrite them and you have to rescript them. And the most important thing is the trainees, the trainers, they both should know the same steps. They should be trained on the same lines. So therefore, in a department, every consultant, they should sit together and form a standardized steps. They should agree to disagree on a few points, but then leave it like that and test people on that. And the trainees should know that this is what they are going to be tested on. Paper out karne mein koi nuksan nahi hai for the must know skills. And so assessment, how do you assess skills? Again, you need a checklist. And the trainee should be aware that this is the checklist my trainers are going to use. And when they are being tested, they should not be tested in front of others. That is when they are sarcastic, they go through sarcasm or they feel inferior because others are looking at them. Alone, they are fine. So you can have a CMAC as an example. I have tested the skills of somebody and I have ticked or crossed whatever he has done right or wrong, and then we give them the feedback and allow them to remediate. And similarly, planning skills can be tested, right? And then you can replay the interventions and go through debriefing. So this is one of the videos which I shot, and you can see this is what an examinee is doing. So it looks, atrocious, but what should I do? So there are two things which we do. One is a feedback. Feedback is actually pointing fingers. You did that wrong, you did this wrong, you did that wrong. That is to put people down. And debriefing is something where I ask the same person, can we do it differently? Was there anything that you could have done better, or was it fine? So we have found that 90% out of 90 out of 100 times, they know that they did it wrong. And they will say, sir, can I do it again? So that gives them such a wonderful feeling. And I'm telling you, after being a professor, the professor with the commas, to come to this level and allow people to talk in front of you is, it was such a learning experience for me. So then, of course, how do you conduct while managing patients? What to say, what not to say, and then how to market our skills. Anesthetists are very poor in marketing their skills. They will just do a very difficult intubation, sweating, heart rate 160, and then they'll go out and be having their tea. Because they will never say, कि आज इतना मुश्किल case कर दिया. Unlike the surgeons who bloody cut into an artery and they say, anatomy आज कुछ interesting लग रहा है, So we have never learned this art. So this again has to be learned, So this, you can see that we were doing a case where, Dr. Sunil is only busy bothering the ENT people, keeping them engrossed in strange talks and describing our procedure, what a wonderful device that we are using, and so on. So we have to market our skills. We have to market our wares. This is what we learned over a period of time. CMAC use कर रहे हैं. कभी आपने अंदर देखा है, कभी आपने हमारे monitor पे देखा है, and so on. So this we never do. We do our job quietly and go away. This again over a period of time we learned, and it pays rich dividends. It pays rich dividends. So to summarize, friends, I've just quoted just a few of my experience. There are myriad options available to teach and train, but great options do not translate into great learning unless the teacher is ready to learn himself or herself. And we felt that this learning made us friendly facilitators from intimidating teachers and professors and whatever specialists and so on, and empowered those who were being taught, so-called taught. So thank you very much once again, ISA Daily, for this great opportunity, and our teams, all the teams that I have worked with, and of course, this institution that I am at, that is Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Medical College and Hospital. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Professor Rakesh Kumar, for an excellent talk. Any comments or questions regarding this session?
If I may add, so Dr. Rakesh, the great teacher that he is, he has just shown a really small fraction of the great work that he and Anil and Sunil and his team, they all have been doing. It's really a yeoman service that they have given to the students of anesthesia, and their fame is far and wide, and we are very fortunate to have them amongst us. And I also am a great follower and a passionate teacher of the techniques that Dr. Rakesh has expounded, and I would request him that even though he has left Maulana Azad, I'm happy to see that he has joined a medical college here, the BSA Medical College. He should continue with this good work, and the biggest service that he's also doing is training the trainers. So that is really, really lovely. Thank you for an excellent, excellent talk, Dr. Rakesh. It was really wonderful. And yes, of course, I know so much about you, but others who are the younger generation, I think it'll be really nice for them to see this. And I just love that bit. Yes, intimidating teachers are out. We need to be facilitators, friendly facilitators. That is so, so true. So thank you very much for an excellent topic selection and an excellent talk. Excellent talk.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Dr. Rakesh.
Okay. Moving on to our next session. That's due to some urgent problem, our next presenter, Dr. Ekta, Senior Resident from Sanjay Gandhi, is not available. So the next presentation will be taken by Dr. Nymphia Kaul herself. Dr. Nymphia. इसको मिनिमाइज कर दो पीछे वाले इसको ना एमएस चैट शेयर कर दो लैपटॉप नहीं वो तो शेयर्ड है ये out हो गई शेयर्ड
Okay.
Yes, sir. Good evening to all the esteemed guests who are present in this webinar. I'm Dr. Nymphia Kaul, HOD and DNB teacher at Sanjay Gandhi Hospital, Department of Anesthesiology. Today I'll present to you a small series of cases which we had as an approach to a patient of kyphoscoliosis for LSCS. We had a series of 3 cases. Now, as you all know, kyphoscoliosis is a deformity of the spine, and its prevalence varies from 0.3 to 15% in different studies all over the world. And the females are affected more than the males in the ratio of 3:1. Now, it's mostly a developmental issue, and but it becomes more pronounced the growing years as the vertebrae start growing.
Kyphosis is mostly an exaggerated anterior-posterior angulation, whereas scoliosis is a lateral curvature of the spine. And when patients present to us, there's mostly rotation of the vertebra, deformity of the rib cage, pain and numbness in the lower limbs. And as age advances, they have respiratory and cardiovascular compromise. Now, the severity of scoliosis is best measured by Cobb's angle, which we can talk about subsequently. Now, it is seen that kyphosis is mostly age-related or due to poor posture. In our country, tuberculosis is an important factor. Then developmental reasons are also important. Then any osteoporosis of the spine or injury to the spine can also cause kyphosis. On the other hand, scoliosis is mostly idiopathic in 80% of the patients. But again, in our country, it's tuberculosis, which is an important cause. Then congenital reasons and also part of syndromes like cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, Marfan syndrome, where there are some muscular defects or any developmental defects. By the time the patients come to us, their spine is usually in a very bad condition, and you can see the various reasons are lack of awareness, delayed recognition, the limited treatment options that they have. Also, the surgeries are complex and expensive and not available in most of the government hospitals. So all the children grow up with their deformities. Now, this is just a way to measure scoliosis, and it's a radiological measurement, and higher the degree, higher is the scoliosis, which is mostly done if the surgery on the spine is needed. We had 3 cases presented to us during the COVID period. Patient 1 was 21 years old, patient 2 was 22 years old, and the third one was 24 years old. First one weighed 47 kilos, the next one 38, and the third one was 48 kilos. All of them were short-statured, and the first one was 4 feet, the second one was just 3 feet, and the third one was a little above 4 feet. And the 2 were primary gravida, whereas the third one was second gravida. All of them had kyphoscoliosis. These are the patients that we that had come to a hospital for delivery of the babies, and this was the gross deformities that they had. In the first 2, it was mostly congenital or developmental, as they had seen it right from the beginning of the childhood. But in the third one, it was tuberculosis childhood, which was the reason for her kyphosis. And on checking, all of them had deformities of the rib cage, pelvis, and all of them were short-statured, but the second one was very short. However, on examination, none of them had any neurodeficit, but yes, one of them had received a spinal in the previous pregnancy, which for delivery of the baby. She was the shortest patient that we had, and patient number 2. On examination, all the vitals were within normal limits, the pulse, blood pressure, the SpO2 on examination. And the chest was also auscultated to see if air entry was good. It was equal in all the patients and it was adequate. There was no apparent abnormality in the CVS system. We palpated the spine, and in all the patients, all the spinous processes were not palpable. They were deformed. Some of them were not equidistant. And however, the airway in all the 2 was Mallampati grade 2. Now, even though spirometry would have been ideally done in these patients, but it was not available due to COVID-19 pandemic. And echo would also be important in all these patients, but they all came as semi-emergencies, and our hospital did not have an in-house for this. So we all had to plan our management, and our aim was to give skilled anesthesia to minimize the risk to fetus and mother, at the same time to ensure adequate pain relief to the mother. And there were many challenges to this. First of all was the short stature, and one of them was extremely short-statured. Then we expected that the drug dosage would be different because of pregnancy as well as the deformities. We expected restrictive lung disease. Again, the approach to give spinal would be difficult, and we were not sure what the outcome would be. Intubation could also be difficult. Then if the deformities were due to any muscle diseases, we would expect myopathy as well as post-op respiratory compromise. Now, to give the best anesthesia to this, we reviewed a lot of literature, and it was seen that no single regimen has been recommended for such patients. Some have given general anesthesia, some spinal, epidural has also been given, CSE, and even sometimes local had to be given when all other measures failed. Like this patient, David et al. Have given spinal anesthesia to their patients. Sarah et al. Have given GA to their patients. So on the basis of these, we just weighed the pros and cons. And general anesthesia was most important if the patient herself preferred it, or it was very good if the surgery was prolonged, or if the deformity was such that positioning would become difficult. But there were many disadvantages like restrictive airway disease, difficult airway and intubation, chances of hypoxia, difficult to wean, pulmonary hypertension, etc. Now, epidural has also been attempted with success, and ultrasound has been used to identify the space. But there were more challenges, like the needle insertion would be difficult, the space would be more distorted for the catheter to pass in. We would not be sure about the spread, it could be patchy. And there were very high chances of dural puncture. Then the third one, which we considered, was the subarachnoid block. The advantages was that the space would be less distorted and the spread of local anesthesia would be more reliable. And then appearance of CSO would be a short thing that the needle has entered this dural, below the dura. And the problem of dural puncture would also be avoided. But it could have been difficult to perform because pregnancy would further decrease the space, the volume of CSO would be less, it could be an uneven block, or the local anesthetic would run off on either side of the deformity. So on considering all these conditions, we came to the conclusion that subarachnoid block would be very good in our patient because they were all young, they do not have any cardiorespiratory insufficiency, and the surgery was not very long. So we recorded the vitals. The chest was auscultated for air entry and also to see the degree of deformity. The airway was assessed, the mouth opening and Mallampati grading was done. The neck movement was also checked. Then the spine was assessed to see the shape and deformity and if we could palpate the spinous processes. All the patients were shifted to OT with the ringer lactate started, monitors established. All of them were done in the sitting position with hyperbaric bupivacaine 0.5% and 25G Quincke needle was used. Then came the problem, what would be the dosage in these patients? Because they were all very short and their the spaces would be distorted. So on seeing a number of articles on this, we had seen that many had given the dose based on the height. Some had combined it with height and weight also. And some had given only on the basis of height. So there was this Harton's dose chart. This was made, this he had published in 2005 for 0.5% bupivacaine, which had patient's weight on one side and the patient's height on the other side, and the appropriate volume of the local anesthetic to be given. However, our patients were shorter than this, the minimum height that he had given. This is another chart where the dosage is given in ml according to the height of the patient, but all our patients were shorter than this. So we came to some other articles where they have used different doses starting from 0.05 to 0.06 and 0.075. So in our patients, we decided to go with the lowest dose that was given for adequate anesthesia, which was 0.05 milligram per centimeter. So accordingly, the first patient got 1.2 ml, the second got 1 ml, and the third patient got 1.3 ml. In all these patients, we saw that then comes the approach. What would be the best approach in such a patient? And again, our residents had to give multiple pricks, but then they succeeded in this. And it is seen that the best approach is the modified paramedian approach. Just entry would be just lateral to the dorsal spine with the needle perpendicular to the skin, mostly on the convex side. And the needle would be walked over the lamina if it was encountered till free flow of CSF occurred. And this all we succeeded in all the patients. The drug was deposited and the patient was positioned. The next problem was how to position the patient. We did not want the drug to run over the concavity to the higher segments. nor did we want the drug to get pooled in the convexity and give a segmental block. So pillows and pads were kept to ensure that the position of patient was in such a way that the appropriate segments would be blocked. Then the level of analgesia was confirmed. Surgery started when it reached to T6 and all the patients were completed successfully and shifted to the recovery room. So this was our conclusion that on seeing all the patients, that anesthesia, even though it poses a significant risk to the parturient, with kyphoscoliosis, there is no single regimen that can be recommended for anesthesia management. And pregnancy exacerbates both the severity of spinal curvature and the cardiorespiratory compromise in these patients. But the maternal mortality and morbidity correlates well with the degree of functional impairment before pregnancy. In all our patients, they were young, so we did not expect a lot of degree of functional impairment in them. Again, care has to be taken to avoid hypoxia, hypercapnia, and acidosis. And if the corpse angle in scoliosis is more than 60 degrees or with advancing age, then we need to do cardiological evaluation to assess the ventricular size and any pulmonary hypertension which may have occurred. And it is important to document any pre-existing neurological deficits. So this was our experience, and the conclusion was that spinal anesthesia can safely be administered in patients with kyphoscoliosis for cesarean section. I thank you all for your patient hearing. Sorry. Sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Nimfia. Any questions, queries, or comments for this session? Most welcome.
I would like to thank Dr. Nimfia for sharing these three very challenging cases and the very systematic approach to management of these patients. I'm sure our audience would have gained a lot from this presentation. Thank you, madam. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
अभी तो बहुत so we move on to our next session, which is presented by Dr. Rajendra Kumar Barua, who is an associate professor at Dr. BSA Medical College Hospital. Currently, he is on diverted capacity as HOD Critical Care, Burari Hospital. And this session is moderated by Dr. Anil Mishra, who is a SAG at Dr. BSA Hospital. Dr. Mishra, please.
Very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Such a pleasure to be here and be with you. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Dr. Rajendra. He's been looking after the ICU in Dr. BSA Hospital for quite a while, and he's got a considerable degree of experience in managing things over here and very organized. I'm looking after the ICU now, and I can see the amount of work that he's already put in, the effort that has gone in. So I'll invite him to give you an overview and his talk about how he has managed to control the hospital-associated infections in the ICU with all the data from the past that we have with us. Dr. Rajendra, please.
Thank you, sir, for the nice introduction. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to share our experience with the implementation of infection control practices and their impact on incidence of hospital-associated infection. The hospital-associated infection are those infections that were neither present nor incubating at the time the patient got admitted to the healthcare facility. So any infection which developed 2 calendar days or more after hospitalization, or within 10 days after discharge from the hospital, or within 30 days after the operative procedure is considered as hospital associated infection. You know, the patient safety is a fundamental right, and the prevention and control of hospital associated infection is an important component of the patient safety. As per the WHO, 1.7 million patients who are admitted in the hospital, they acquired hospital associated infection. And for out of 100 patients, 7 in developed countries and 10 in the developing nations, they acquired hospital associated infection. And among these, 10% of these patients die. And one important point to note that 1/3 of these infections are potentially preventable. And the cost of prevention is minuscule when we compared it to the treatment of the infections. They have very serious impact on the not only on the patient as well as on the hospital services. They cause more serious illness, and they put additional burden on the hospital services by prolonging the length of stay. They increase antimicrobial resistance. They cause long-term disability, increased mortality, and high additional burden, financial burden on the hospital as well as the patient and their relatives. The source of infection can be endogenous from the area that are normally inhabited by the microorganism, like the skin, nose, mouth, or it can be exogenous from the contaminated hands of the healthcare workers, the visitors, the contaminated equipments we use in the patient's care. So these are some common hospital-associated infections that found in the intensive care unit. CLA-BSI, the central line associated bloodstream infection. The COTI, the catheter associated urinary tract infection. VAP, ventilator associated pneumonia. So we cannot change the human condition, but we can change the condition under which humans work. So can we do something about these the infections? Yes, we can do. We can use these strategies to prevent the hospital-associated infection, like we can develop the safe culture for the patients, following the guidelines, developing antibiotic stewardship, doing active surveillance, screening and cohorting the patients, doing the hand as well as environmental hygiene. Or we can take the help of the external agencies like NABH, NQAS or JCIs. So being a in charge ICU or the quality nodal officer, I took the initiative to start the infection control practices in our ICU. I consulted our microbiologist friend, and we searched the net or took the collected the information from the various sources, and we formed some checklist, small checklist related to the infection control. We disseminated this information to the all ICU staff, and we did the gap analysis with the checklist. Then we made the training need and training calendar, and we started training our staff. Initially, we used to call them for the classroom teaching. Initially we started doing every weekly, then fortnightly. Then we found that we are not getting much benefit with this training. So we started doing the on-site training, and we included this training as a part of induction training. After the training, we implemented these policies followed by the periodic audit, and we used to do the corrective and the preventing action. So these are some trainings we did in our ICU, like the standard precautions, hand hygiene, safe injection and safe infusion practices, biomedical waste management, decontamination, disinfection, sterilization, 6 hours of medication, and some trainings related to HAI only, like this, how to collect the sample and transport these to the lab. And because you know the 1/3 of the error they occur during the collection of the sample. Then the date of event, that is the first site of event related to site-specific infection. It can be the sign-on symptom, it can be the positive culture or the chest X-ray. Similarly, the IWP is the infection window period. 3 days before and 3 days after the date of event is the infection window period. The POA, the infection which is present at the time of admission. The patient who developed the infection within 2 calendar days of the admission is the POA. Then the various criteria to identify the HAI, the repeat infection time frame. How we label them as a HAI. The infection which occurred within 14 days of the date of event is the infection period. period. If the patient develops similar kind of infection in this time frame, we do generally not consider them as a HAI. Similarly, device-associated infection and the care of bundle. These are the training we organize, conducted in our ICU for the infection control. And as you know, we are very confused how to start implementing these practices. As you know, the 80% of the infection are transmitted via hands, because the patient often carry resistant bacteria on many areas of their skin, even when they have no wounds or broken skin, and they contaminate the item in the immediate vicinity of the patient. And healthcare workers who are taking care of them, they contaminate their hand and spread the infection to the other patient. So we thought, let's start with the low-hanging fruits. We started with the hand hygiene practices. This is the hand hygiene practice compliance tool we use. We made a similar toolkit in our organization, and we did the hand hygiene, the compliance. We found that compliance is very less, despite the implementation of these practices, even for more than 1 month. Then we discuss these issues with our staff in person, and we try to convince them. Some of them give the reason that they cause there is shortage of antiseptic solution. Some of them says there is a dryness, they cause dryness of hand. Then I used to talk them in person. Then I felt it is not the supplies which is essential, it is the change of mindset. So what we did is we discussed this issue with our microbiologist. We took the sample from the vicinity of the patient and from some of our workers' hand, and the results were very surprising. These are some of the areas which are contaminated, found contaminated, and even some of the workers' hand also we found the organism on their hands. So we discuss again, re-emphasizes the practice of hand hygiene, the 3 feet surrounding the bed in the patient area, and we put this kind of poster. We use with the help of the WHO 5 movements of hand hygiene, 2 before and 3 after, and proper technique of the hand hygiene poster we displayed in all areas of the ICU. And then we re-emphasize that the cleaning and disinfection policies, like we used to ensure that our cubicle should be clean at least once in each shift with triple bucket system, and once in 24 hours the cubicle should be cleaned at least with the flooding with detergent and lot of water. The wet mopping of the high dusting area, and we have 3 cubicle in our ICU, and whenever the load is less, we try to clean all the ICUs, the wall of the ICUs with the brushing and lot of detergent and water. We used to ensure that the high touch surfaces should be cleaned at least once in each shift. And the other areas like bed rails, the patient lockers, the surrounding tables, the ventilator surface, the monitor, they at least should be cleaned at least once in each shift. And in between the patient, we used to do the complete disinfection of the bed as well as the mattress. Regarding engineering control, we discuss with this issue with our PW staff, and we try to record all the temperature, humidity, and air exchanges, and the cleaning record of the HEPA filter. Then we introduced the visitor policy, once a day visitor policy, but we found it is very difficult to implement. Still, we are were able to manage it. Then we introduced the practice of using the multi-dose vial policy. We used to write date and time, and used to use the disposable and syringe and needle with all of the drugs. Similarly, whenever we used to use the ampules, the staff used to clean them with the 70% isopropyl alcohol. Then we introduced the practice of using a dedicated stethoscope, but we found it is very difficult. So we came back to our old age policy. We used to clean the stethoscope with the 70% isopropyl alcohol. When our staff are well acquainted with the HAIs and how to identify the hospital-associated infection, then we introduce slowly the bundle of care. This is nothing but using the research application of the research-based knowledge into the practice. So bundle care is they are the structured way of improving process of care and patient outcomes using a set of evidence-based intervention at the same time. So whenever these intervention used collectively, the outcome is always better. So we started using the bundle care. The CLA BSI insurgent bundle is the avoid unnecessary cannulation. So whenever the cannulation is required, the resident used to consult us whether this except in the emergency hours. Then we started using a single lumen catheter. Higher the lumen, higher the chances of the infection. We used to ensure the maximum sterile precaution is taken while the resident is putting the cannulation. Then regarding the site, we used to prefer the neck as well as the chest because the femoral lines are there is a chance of higher infection. Then important aspect of the preparation. We used to tell them that the resident do the cleaning of the wider area of the skin with the scrub and rub tapping, because when you do not scrub, the bacteria will remain on the skin and they will go inside along with the catheter. Then we started using the semi-permeable dressings instead of the gauze-based dressing, and we used to record the date of cannulation. For the maintenance bundle, we daily used to review the line daily. The line which are not required, we used to remove them immediately. And before accessing the catheter, used to clean the hand, used to do the hand hygiene practices. And we found that the catheter hubs, ports, and connector, they are the important source of infection. So we introduced the policy of scrub and rub the hub and ports before using them, and replace the dressing that are wet, soiled, or dislodged. We stop changing the dressing of the IV line routinely. The gauze-based dressing was used to change 2 days, and semi-permeable dressing within 7 days. And the no topical antibiotic are required for the dressing. Similarly, for the continuous administration set, we used to change the continuous set for within 7 days. The blood and fat and muscle set every 24 hourly. And whenever we use the propofol, we used to change the set after using the vial. We introduced the practice of daily ICU patients washed with the chlorhexidine-based preparation based solution. This is the toolkit we used to use for the bundle care. The senior most nurse was entrusted to observe the practice of insertion of the center lines. They used to tick all these parameters, and during the morning round, we used to review the requirement of the line. Similarly, for the COTI, we found that the important area for the entry of bacteria is the external urinary meatus and the urethra. So we used to introduce the catheter when the bladder is full to have the benefit of the flushing out effect. And then the cleaning with the 0.2% chlorhexidine solution, and inject 2% lignocaine gel and hold it for 3 minutes, and then insert the catheter with the appropriate side of catheter with the non-touch technique. Then we used to ensure that the catheter is secure over the thigh, because the repeated movement of the catheter, they also lead to the injury, and that may lead to the colonization of the urethra. And the weight of the the collection bag may cause the accidental dislodgement of the catheter. In case of the fecal incontinence, we used to clean the area, or if the catheter required to be changed, we used to change the catheter. And very important practice we introduced is the daily cleaning of the meatal, because to prevent the incrustation and the contamination, because and antiseptic solution is not required for the cleaning. The second point of entry is the junction between the catheter and the drainage tube. So do not disconnect catheter unless absolutely necessary. And for the specimen collection, disinfect sampling port by the 70% isopropyl alcohol, allow it to dry, then clamp the tubing so that the freshly voided urine get refilled. Then use the sterile syringe and needle to collect the sample. The third point of entry is the junction between the drainage tube and the collection bag, and that is very important that you should use the set which is the drainage tube is welded into the bag, and we used to use the closed system, because closed system which is having the drip chamber or the no-return valve, it maintains the integrity of the system, and the chances of infection is drastically reduced with the use of this system. Keep the bag below level of bladder, and whenever it is not possible, clamp the tubing temporarily to prevent the reflex from the bag into the catheter. Empty the bag every 8 hourly or early if it is full. Do not hold the bag upside down when emptying the bag. The fourth point of entry is the tap at the bottom of the collection bag. So collection bag must not touch the floor, and whenever you are using the urine receptacles should be they should be single use and should be stored dry after each use. The routine bladder irrigation or washout with antiseptic solution is not recommended, and we used to inspect the catheter daily for any sign of infection. This is the checklist for use for the bundle care. And for the VAP, we introduce we keep our patients 30 to 45 degree head up position. We used to assess during morning round the need of sedation. with the readiness to extubate, this stress erythroprophylaxis, the deep vein thrombosis, and we introduced the oral contamination with the chlorhexidine, and we found it is very important, and it drastically reduced the chances of the VAP in our patients. The subglottic secretion, cause the micro aspiration of the secretion that led to the higher incidence of the VAP. So we started using the subglottic suctioning tube. We used to measure the cuff pressure at least once in each shift. For the humidification system, initially we used to use the humidification system with water trap ventilated circuit. And in one of the month, we found that our 3-4 patients developed the Acinetobacter. So we decided to do the active surveillance. We took the samples from the humidification chamber and the ventilator circuit from all patients. We found that out of 12, the 7 circuits are contaminated. So we stopped using this humidification system. We started using the HME filters with for the passive humidification. Similarly, we used to use the ambu bag, autoclave and ambu bag for every patient, or after the use, we used to dismantle them and used to clean with them with the soap and water, and again send for the autoclaving. The laryngoscope used to clean with the detergent and water, followed by the high level of disinfection. For the suctioning, we ensured that the staff should wash their hand before and after the procedure. There is a Klebsiella outbreak in our nursery. We found that the Klebsiella was grown in and the outbreak investigation was done. We found the Klebsiella was recovered from the found in the suction tubes and bottle. So we introduced the practice of cleaning the suction bottle with the scrubbing and rubbing technique at least once in each shift. And we used to use the Yonker suction for the oral suctioning, and there the Yonker suctioning tube are used for the suction machines. Similarly, the nebulizers is another source of important source of infection. So we start using the inline nebulization, and we used to ensure that the nebulizer should be cleaned at least once in a day with a soap and water. This is the VAP bundle care checklist. This is the suction cleaning and disinfection checklist we used to use in our ICU. These are the IEC material for the prevention of the HAE, which are displayed in our ICU. This is the HAE HAE reporting criteria form. So the surveillance is very important part of the infection prevent. It involved for the clinical diagnosis and the treatment of suspected patient. So whenever the new patient admitted in ICU, we used to record the date of admission, the IV cannulation date, the device in situ, the details of antibiotic, and the pressure ulcer. And we used to send the zero culture as per the requirement of the patient, like the blood and urine and tracheal. We used to maintain a separate culture register in our ICU, which and each separate page for each patient. We used to write the date of events, the date of culture, when the culture was sent, and whenever we received the report, we used to enter the report in this culture register. And similar register was maintained in the microbiology department. So whenever we found that patient developed new infection, we can see the incidence of past infection, and we used to correlate well with these culture registers. Initially, we used to send we used to do the active surveillance. We used to send every Monday and Thursday the culture from the for the all patient. Then later we found that the sending unnecessary sampling the culture was not good, so we stopped this practice. Senior most nurse, they used to monitor and record the compliance of the hand hygiene and bundle of care, and the infection control nurse, we used to supervise the senior most nurse for in this practice. We used to maintain a HAI register in our ICU. We used to do the entries of at the same time of each day. The records were maintained for the central venous line days, urinary catheter days, number of ventilator days, and whenever the culture came positive, we used to discuss this very critically with the help of the microbiologist. We used to enter this in we used to fill the HAI surveillance form, and we found that all the HAI criteria were met. We used to label them as a HAI. And then we used to found that what is the region of this the culture is positive. We used to do the CAPA, and these data were used to discuss in the monthly meeting of the HIC. So when we found that the implementers of these practices drastically reduce our infection, so we decided to collect this data as this is the quality audit. So hospital ethical committee approval was not required. We took the data from the HI register, like the number of patients who developed CLBSI, the COTI, VAP, the central venous line days, urinary catheter days, number of ventilator days. And then we did the analysis. As you know, the incidence is the number of new cases in a particular time frame. So incidence can be calculated by expressed by the percentage or the proportion, but as the risk of infection accumulate as the line in place. So we analyze our data with the incidence density or the incident rate. The formula we use is the number of patients who develop the CLBSI divided by the number of central line days in a month. Then we found that when we started the patient in the month of November, the central line days was 87, and 6 patients developed the CLBSI, and the incident rate was 69. And over the period of time, we were able to reduce this rate to less than 13%. Similarly, the COTI rate, we were able to reduce it to less than 8%. And the VAP rate less than 5%. And you can see the graphical representation of these infections. To summarize, the HI is an important component of patient safety. Hospital-associated infections are preventable, and no sophisticated equipment or gadgets are required for prevention of the HI. Simple techniques like hand hygiene, the bundle of care, are very effective way of reducing the incidence of HI. Thank you very much for your patience listening.
Thank you, Dr. Rajendra. I wish you are back to Ambedkar Hospital ICU. Any comments or questions regarding this session? Most welcome.
I wish to say my heart is swelling with pride to hear Dr. Rajendra speak so well after having done so much. You know, Rajendra was our postgraduate and our senior resident, and he was a very dedicated boy. Even at that young age, he was interested in ICU. He was one of the first residents to learn tracheostomy. And you know, when we started the percutaneous tracheostomy, I used to have Rajendra stand by my side for support in the first few cases. So he has been so dedicated, and it's so good to see him having gone so far. And this is such an important topic, and it's such an important component of ICU care, which is responsible for the morbidity and mortality that we see in the intensive care units. And he's done a Herculean task. He has addressed every corner. I would like to ask you, Rajendra, how much time did it take for you to train your staff? How many beds do you have in your ICU, and how much staff could you train? And because you know, one thing is the concept, the implementation, then the documentation, the surveillance, and you've also, you know, analyzed your results very beautifully, which is so heartening, because yes, obviously the practices have been very, very effective. So could you tell us how did you go about it and your journey, and how much time it took for you?
Ma'am, as you know, the staff constraint is always there, and initially we used to call them for the classroom teaching, but because of the shortage of staff, we are not able to free them. So we started using the on-site training. That is a very important method of training the staff, because you can do the on-site. You are there in the morning shift. You can talk to them. You can discuss your practices, and you can observe them also. And it took around 3 to 4 months to train all the staff in our ICU. We have 3 cubicles and 12 beds, 4 beds in each cubicle.
So, you know, you were talking about washing your cubicles like once a day. You know, bed occupancy हमारे यहाँ जैसे 100% से ऊपर रहती है. I mean, do you think it's a good idea to have an alternative space where you could, shift the patients? Because हमारे तो alternate space also there is pressure to fill up.
There is no need to shift the patient. You have to do just floor cleaning with the detergent and.
Okay, only the floor cleaning, not the walls. Yeah. Not the walls.
No walls. Whenever the space is available, you can do the
available only that time.
We usually have 3 cubicles. Whenever the load is less, we shift the patient to the other cubicle, and we used to do this.
So total nurses and doctors and your paramedics, कितने लोग हैं आपके ICU में?
अब लोग तो काफी कम है हमारे पास. We used to have for 12 bedded ICU, we used to have 6 nurses in the morning shift. 2:1 ratio. We used to ensure that the ventilated patient are not ignored, and non-ventilated patient we used to keep 1:3 or 1:4.
No, commendable work done. Commendable work, Rajendra. So proud of you. So proud of you. One small question: how do you disinfect your mattresses? It's a practical.
Practical aspect is mattresses should be disinfected with detergent and water. Or if they are contaminated, we used to carbolize them with the 0.5% hypochlorite solution. We should not use the alcohol on them.
Okay. So that you have found effective. No, thank you very, very much. Very, very exhaustive lecture, and I think you've done a wonderful job, and really proud of you, dear. Really proud. Thank you, Rajendra. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rajendra, and thank you, ma'am. Our last session for the evening is a quiz by Dr. Nandita Joshi, who is an assistant professor at BSA Medical College. She has been waiting quite patiently, and I will really appreciate her. It's been a long day for her. She did the urology OT as well, and now I hand over to Dr. Nandita.
आपका पेन ड्राइव कहाँ लगी हुई है ना? कुछ
कंप्यूटर से चले
वही कर रहा हूँ सर.
Lovely to see you, Nandita.
Good evening,
another gem from our hospital. Good evening.
I'm very happy to see you.
Yes, same here, dear.
1 minute, ma'am, thoda sa. After such an exhaustive session, a very small quiz session is there, ma'am.
No issues. Take your time.
Hello, ma'am. इसे कर लूँ मैं.
You're not heard now.
उससे थोड़ा सा ना वो लगता है कि क्या मैं हूँ ऐसी कुछ लगा हूँ
तो वो किसी को नहीं कर रहे हैं तो बहुत नजर नहीं आते पर हो रहा
ये
आता है
ये
हाँ.
क्या हो गया?
मैं दिखनी नहीं
क्या करूँ
विजिबल है
विजिबल है आओ दिखा इनका तुम्हारा ये दिख रहा क्लीन दिख वो वाला पोजीशन नहीं दिख रहा
वही ट्राई कर रहा हूँ सर.
बहुत छोटा है ऐसे मतलब राइट साइड में तो दिखा रहा है राइट साइड में तो दिख रही है
इसकी दिख रही है
ये राइट साइड में दिख रही है वो एकदम नीचे मिनिमाइज में है वो
वही कर रहा हूँ।
उसको क्लिक कर जहाँ पे वो दिख रही है, तेरे को नहीं दिख रही?
अब दिखा गई सर?
स्क्रीन आ रही है?
आ गई?
देखिए भी
अब आएगी सर वो पहली वाली स्टॉप आ गई, पहली वाली स्टॉप वीडियो ऑन कर देना।
यस आ गई है, हमारे को दिख रही थी शुरू से ही।
Now you on.
Correct. Data is also visible.
And there is the screen.
But we can't hear you.
Good evening, everybody. Am I audible and visible?
Yes. You're not visible, but you're audible.
You're audible, not visible.
Okay, ma'am. After such a exhaustive session on hospital infection control and teaching practices, here is a very small quiz just to lighten up the mood about anesthesia, and I'm sure everybody will be able to participate if they do. So the first question is, as ma'am was telling about creating a history of anesthesia and everything. So I would like to ask the first question. Lithion is the name given to, if anybody can answer. Who's answering? Anybody is answering? Anybody is there? Ma'am? आप ही दे दो आंसर. Okay, anybody can type the answer also on the screen.
Yeah, they should raise their hand or type the answer in the chat box. Give them a time, Nandita. Time limit.
Okay. I'll give a time limit of 15 seconds. So it's okay. Lithium is the name given to ether. Okay. So we go to the next question. Published since 1922, which is the title of the first journal of anesthesia. Anybody? आप ही लोग आंसर दे दो. No answers. I think meeting में कोई है भी. It is anesthesia and analgesia. Okay. So the next question. In the first public demonstration of anesthesia on 16th October, who was the patient? Answer. Anybody's right? Anybody's raising the hands? Yeah, ma'am is right. It is Gilbert Abbott. So this goes to Dr. Nymphia. Next question is, smokers need more anesthesia than non-smokers. Is it true or false? True. Is it true or false?
true.
False. It is actually true because smokers have a very irritable airway, and so they need more anesthesia than others. Hence, it is a true statement. And the other advantage smokers have, that is, they have less of PONV. So, what are the changes in unstable bradycardia? AHA guidelines. Any answers from anybody? So I will only tell, AHA guidelines have increased the dosage of atropine from 0.5 milligram to 1 milligram, and it may be used up to 3 to 5 times. Then the second is the dose of dopamine has been changed from 2 to 20 mics to 5 to 20 mics per kg. And for transcutaneous spacing, they have increased the range of the heart rate, which we may set to 60 to 80. So anybody can identify this device?
Bhaska Mas.
Yes, ma'am. Very right. 5 points to ma'am. And this is a little bit tricky question. What are the name used for the area marked by these arrows? What is this portion of the Bhaska Mas called? Pardon, ma'am?
Pharyngeal sump. Pharyngeal sump?
Stump, right, ma'am. It is the pharyngeal sump. So the advantage of the stump is it will help to
collects the secretions in the pharynx. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes. So this is another tricky question.
I wasn't answering. I wasn't answering because I thought faculty is not allowed. Yeah, but then I thought when Dr. Nimfi answered, I said, okay, we are allowed.
Yes, ma'am. Surely. Thoda somebody should answer also, na? What is true about Deslorraine Tech 6 vaporizer? Like Deslorraine has a boiling point of 22 degrees Celsius. So is it heated before it's ready to use, or it is cooled before it is ready to use? Heated, right, ma'am. So at what temperature?
40 degrees.
Anybody? So Deslorraine is actually heated to 39 degrees Celsius and before it is ready for use. And it is because if it is, okay. Next question. The risk factors for delirium in ICU include diabetes, hypertension, COPD, MI, or use of corticosteroids. There can be multiple risk factors. Yes, steroids is one of them. Then, Dr. Rajendra, risk factors for delirium in ICU. हाँ, इनमें से choose करना है. So the risk factors is COPD, use of corticosteroids, and hypertension. Diabetes and MI are not the risk factors for delirium in ICU. The neonatal side effects of pethidine given for labor analgesia are more severe if given 3 hours before delivery or more if given during last hour of delivery. Include respiratory depression and include an increase in arterial artery pH. So what are the correct answers? Anybody? You can unmute your mics and answer. Yeah, the answer can be more than one. Respiratory depression is one, then it causes a decrease in pH. They are more severe if given 3 hours or more before delivery and include respiratory depression. Factors enhancing bupivacaine toxicity is pregnancy, presence of calcium channel blockers, and arterial hypoxemia. Thank you for the quiz. Ma'am, any questions? Anybody, any comments?
Thanks, Nandita.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks, Nandita, for getting the quiz together for us.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll give the mic over to Dr. Naveen now.
So we conclude this session. I thank all the participants, Dr. Nikki ma'am, and all the ISA office bearers who attended the meeting. And
Dr. Naveen, I would request you
yes, ma'am,
to send the abstract of the presentations to our editor, Dr. Parul, and some screenshots and photographs of today's meeting so that they can be published in this month's news bulletin.
Sure, ma'am. I will do that.
And thank you once again for organizing today's meeting. Thank you. It was really an excellent meeting and really enjoyed it. Very, very nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.